We all have a story to tell. For the last 5 years, the Music Legacy Project has been about the work of helping young people find their story and then share it with the world. Every year, a handful of eager students comes to us with incredible talent, but little idea on how to direct it. We take that promise and polish it through workshops, discussions, and guided practice. Over weeks and months, they learn more about the career path of a musician, covering topics like branding, event production, public relations, email etiquette, and social media, and more. Students begin to learn what it means to be a professional. Yes, from different sectors of the Austin music industry drop in to share their expertise and offer key insights. Mentorship and one-on-one tutoring is provided via partnerships with organizations like Anthropos Arts. At the end of this process, we find a more informed and confident young leader in music with more tools and a broader network at their disposal. The future of music in Austin can't get where it's going without knowing where it started. The legacy they leave behind is up to them. We all have a story to tell.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the E4 Youth Virtual Talk Series. I hope you're all having an amazing day. I'm Jaleisha. I am a digital docent with E4 Youth. I'm currently a senior at the University of Texas in Austin, majoring in journalism and communications and leadership. These virtual talks are here for you guys to be able to learn more about different fields in the industry. In the creative industry, specifically in the tech industry, so that you can see what jobs are sort of out there and learn more about what professionals in these fields are doing now, so that maybe one day you can get there as well. And so for today, our guest speaker is Amber Kazalbash, and she's a senior strategist at RGA Austin. She focuses on using her background in social and product to find harmony between tech and creative and build more human brands. An Austin transplant born and raised in Southern California, Amber earned an MS in digital social media and product from USC and a BA in public relations and Spanish from CSU. And she has worked with brands across retail, fashion, and tech industry, and most recently as a social strategist for Microsoft at an Asberg group in Los Angeles. And outside of RGA, Amber serves as the director of marketing for Muslim Women Professionals, a nonprofit which promotes inclusion and empowerment for professional Muslims in the U.S. So I welcome to the screen, Amber.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well. We love when we have a woman in the space.
Yes.
It's so great to see you and to be in this space with you today. And I hope that you're having a good week.
I hope you are too. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I'm excited to get connected more with you and share my experience with everyone else.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's so awesome. Well, just to start off, I sort of want you to talk about what do you do? What is your job? I feel like it's so unique. Whenever I found out about it, it was something that I've never heard before. So I'm sure everybody else would be like, wow, as well. Because I was like, dang, this is a job.
Yeah.
Really find out something new every day.
Yeah, that sounds good. So do we want to start off with the slides and then move into just, casual chat?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Sorry for the inception of screens here, but I'll present my screen. Let me know when you can see.
I can see it.
Okay, cool. So as Jaleisha mentioned, I am a strategist, and that can mean a lot of different things at a lot of different companies. But when you work in the advertising industry, it means that you're basically very closely partnered to your client, and you are helping them make the right decisions for their marketing, their brand campaigns, their online digital experiences, and so on and so forth. And so I'll be kind of at a very high level discussing, what that really means for my day-to-day role. Before I did that, I just wanted to like formally introduce myself. My name is Amber Kazalbash. I'm a senior strategist at RGA Austin. As Jaleisha mentioned, I'm originally from Southern California, born and raised there, went to school out there. And so I've been, working in a lot of different industries over the course of time. And then when I got this opportunity with RGA, it was kind of just the perfect moment in time where I was going to be able to use a lot of different things that I learned early on in my career towards something even bigger, better, and more exciting. So I'm really happy to be here, happy to be in Austin, and excited to kind of share some of my thoughts on my role with you all. So for those of you who don't know who RGA is, what the advertising industry is, RGA kind of sits in a really interesting place within the advertising industry. We are not your traditional ad agency by any means. We do a lot more than a billboard or a social media ad or an ad that you may see on TV. We have a really interesting perspective on how brands can grow and connect with people on a very personal level. And so this principle of designing businesses and brands for a more human future is something that I think everybody who works at RGA really keeps in the back of their mind, regardless of if they are a creative, whether they're doing copy, design, art direction, or if they're on the account side, working very closely with the clients themselves to better understand how to grow their business. The production side, the people who are actually figuring out the logistics of how to make interesting work come to life in market. Or if you're like me on the strategy side, really figuring out what's going on in the world and how to plan for more human and more emotional brands. And so we say that we design businesses and brands for a more human future, because what we're really looking to do is not to just put more content out there. I'm sure you guys have seen this time and time again. You go on your Instagram and it is overwhelming. You go on the internet and there are millions of search results, trying to take up mind share of the things that you're curious about. So for us, it's really about intentional ways of having brands connect with humans and essentially, building towards a more human, more connected, and more hopefully harmonious sort of future. So I'll stop talking about the sort of mission behind RGA and instead kind of share how the company has grown over time, just at a very high level. I'm definitely not the most knowledgeable of it. I've only been at RGA for about a year, but I've been so thankful and so lucky to be able to work with a lot of different employees and colleagues across a lot of different areas of the world. We have offices in almost every continent, which is really great. We have a presence in almost every, major city across, every metro area. So for me, moving from LA to Austin, it was great to see that, a company of this scale is able to work with so many interesting brands. In Austin in particular, we work with a lot of like legacy brands, meaning that these are brands that the normal everyday person is very familiar with, but these are brands that they're so familiar over time that they're looking for interesting ways to become more connected with their consumers. So they're not necessarily the most techie brands of the world, but they're consistently looking for ways to become more connected with the way that consumers are changing. And so it's been an interesting challenge for me as a strategist to be able to think about the everyday person, think about people who I see in my life who, don't consider themselves the most technical people, but who want a stronger connection to the brands that they make and want to develop that sense of loyalty with those brands. And here's kind of like a quick view at just some of the quick hit brands that we do work with. You'll see a lot of big names here, and this is just like a very short snapshot of all the different partners that RGA works with and builds different programs and activations for. But you can see there's quite a bit of a range, everything from the Googles of the world to players in the financial space, the entertainment space, the quick service space, travel, you name it, we can kind of do it. And because we have so many different offices and people who work, obviously, at this point in time remotely, we're able to collaborate with each other very well. So, I've had exposure. I've been in conversations with people who aren't necessarily in the US, but who have been able to contribute to, different projects that I've been working on. And then even within the US, I've been able to work with basically people from every single office across the nation. So it's definitely a collaborative effort, and we work with a lot of really exciting and interesting brands. And my role in particular is something that just keeps me so motivated and so passionate. So I didn't really explain it in detail, so I'd like to take a few minutes to do so. What exactly do you do, Amber? Well, I guess the short answer is that my main responsibility is to be highly aware of what consumers need and care about. And so strategy plays a really interesting role in kind of the way that the teams work within sort of the agency or digital space. Typically, if you're working in an agency or a digital consultancy or something with that same sort of format where you're working to help a marketing manager or an innovation manager on the client side, you are working hand in hand with the client as well as with an account manager who kind of helps manage the client's expectations, where the client wants you and your team to focus. And so there's, a lot of collaboration there. But in addition to that, there's also collaboration with people who are highly creative. So I mentioned before, the copywriters, the art directors, the people on the production side, the designers. So there's a lot of different people and parties involved. But the strategist, as someone who is planning for the future, planning different ways to get brands more connected with the consumer, has a really integrated and collaborative role. And the idea of strategy and what they call account planning started, I think, back in like the 60s in the UK in London. And they just, in a few different ad agencies, they saw this need for there to be a specialized skill set where someone was being extremely forward looking and looking at the behaviors of the consumer and using insights around, the behaviors of the consumer to then inform more exciting, more engaging, more interesting ad campaigns. And so that same format is something that agencies pretty much across the board still use today. But for me specifically working at RGA, the way it kind of works is that I'm working hand in hand with people who are very creative, very like digitally savvy, as well as people who are also very tech savvy too. So the developers of the world, the people who are more in product management. And so it's a nice balance between the typical traditional ad campaigns and the more digital oriented activations where you're seeing AR and VR lenses come to life, or, I guess the list kind of goes on, but anything that's cool and new and exciting, it all kind of starts with what the strategist sees happening from the consumer's perspective and how they communicate that back out to the rest of their team. So like I said, I help brands understand what consumers actually care about. I'm sure you guys have experienced this time and time again, especially since March, where you see a slew of ads, a slew of social media content talking about how they want you to feel safe during this time and how they want everybody to, feel comfortable with their company during these unprecedented times and blah, blah, blah. And while that's all good and well, and I'm sure it's all well-intentioned, the reality is that every second of every day, consumers' behaviors and mindsets are changing throughout the course of time. So the way that I see my job kind of playing in to reflect that is by doing all sorts of research, all sorts of distillation of that research and analysis of that research to then inform new insights or opportunities for, creative people that I work with to come up with something new and exciting that doesn't sound like we're here for you, or we know that you need help during these unprecedented times. And obviously I'm talking specifically about COVID right now, but I'm sure over the course of time, you all have probably felt the same way about brands kind of all starting to sound the same and nothing really resonating with you at a very personal level. So I have a lot of different job functions, and I've kind of just glazed over them, but the list can kind of go on from even the 9 boxes that are listed out here. But essentially everything that I do is in service of making sure that I can help identify what consumers actually care about, so that when we're going into the stages of creative ideation or figuring out how to come to the landscape with new and interesting marketing or digital activations, that we've found something very differentiated and that feels exciting to consumers, because in reality, it's finally something that they actually care about. And prior to this call, Jaleisha and I were talking at a very high level about what my job was, and she was so shocked by the fact that this was even a job. And I think I'm so lucky to have found a role like this, because prior to this role in my past role as a strategist, I was working in-house as a marketing manager and constantly wondering the same thing, like, how can I get my consumers to care about me more? What do my consumers actually care about? And how do I make creative that much more connected and intertwined in people's daily lives? And so that's my philosophy with strategy. I think it's really about people at a human level and what they care about. And then, all these buckets that are listed below are kind of just inputs to contribute to, what you can get to creatively. And the best way to do so is to really stay tapped into two things. If you're not a strategist or you don't have formal strategy training, the easiest way to get into this, discipline of strategy is to stay tapped, from my perspective, on these two things. The first is culture. This year is a big year in culture. We've got an election coming down the road, a global pandemic, a racial resurgence, a social political, tension, consistently going on. So there's so much to keep track of. And I am constantly, keeping a pulse on Twitter feeds, news articles, publications. Tonight, obviously, the debate. There's just so much going on that as a strategist, it's kind of like part of your everyday life to just be a sponge and listen to everything that's going on in culture. And the second thing I think that is also very important to keep a pulse on as someone who is either interested in working in strategy or who wants to become a strategist is thinking about the human experience. Because of all the things that we're seeing here on the left-hand side of the screen, everything outside of, your bubble of the world, all of that impacts, you as a human, right? We're all going through a very stressful point in time. We are looking for ways to calm our daily lives, for us to find balance between work and school and home life and financial situations and tensions. And so really keeping a clear sense of the human experience for a particular group of consumers, I think is also really important, because when we're thinking about, campaigns or digital activations that really connect with people at a human level, all of those things need to be able to acknowledge what the current state of the human experience is. So, I mean, that's a little bit philosophical, but I hope you guys understand the point that I'm trying to make, which is that if a brand, put out an ad right now and said, oh, everything is so exciting at this point in time and the world feels like such a positive place, it would just feel completely irrelevant to you. And so as part of building a strong strategy, it's important to recognize not only the things that are happening in culture, but how that's impacting people at a human level and speaking to that as well. So with that being said, I think, at a very high level, strategy can be anything and everything. But the way I see it is that it's kind of the starting point for really smart, creative thinking. In the advertising world, strategy has a lot of different functions. But one thing that I can say with certainty is that strategy is just a starting point. It never really ends. When I come up with an insight that I think that a creative campaign or a digital activation can be built off of, I don't stop there after sharing that with the creative or technical people that I'm working with. After I, sort of lay out those insights or those sort of thought starters for the teams that I collaborate with, I then get in the weeds of how are we going to bring this to life and how can that resonate most with the customers moving forward, and then also make sure that I'm communicating that to clients as well. So even though strategy starts in a very deep place of research and reflection, and oftentimes is a very creative and writing heavy exercise to start off with, it definitely does not end there. It's very much a starting point, and it continues on to help bring real interesting creative to life. And so, it's sort of like strategy in and of itself is a skill set rather than a one type of sort of, deliverable that you put out and you send to clients and hit send and end your day. And because it's a skill set, it is a clear reflection of the way someone thinks as well. And so I wanted to share a few examples with you guys of how strategy can be so flexible depending on the client needs. And so I have a few examples here of how RGA specifically has brought those types of things to life. The first example here is something that RGA has worked on with Nike with Air Jordans. I was not on this project specifically. A lot of people within our New York and Portland offices were, but they were working together to solve a challenge that Nike was facing, which was that a younger generation of people who were familiar with Jordans had never actually seen his Airness lace up and do the dunk. So what the strategy ended up panning out into was that we selected Snapchat as our platform to then build a AR filter. And it was a very cutting edge, augmented technology oriented sort of AR filter. And what it did was it started off with a geofence activation happening in downtown LA, where people who were fans of Jordans could then, essentially get involved, be in person in real life, and try the filter out. But the experience definitely didn't stop there. Like RGA really partnered with Nike to better understand how to further that and make it that much more of a cool thing, and bring it to life in a really interesting way past the AR filter. So then on top of that, we did some work on basically having a simultaneous sneaker drop. And a sneaker drop in and of itself is already so difficult to plan logistically. But on top of doing an exclusive sneaker drop with this, new pair of Jordans that could connect with this younger audience, they had quick delivery that eventually got to people's homes within the course of 2 hours. So there was this digital element of this campaign where we had these, AR filters where people could use the technology and interact with the brand in a very socially oriented way. But then it also went into the actual product that Nike was trying to sell, which was this pair of shoes that could be delivered right away. And so in partnership with them, we came up with this really interesting strategy that performed so great. Clients were so happy, and it was a very creative way to solve this very unique business problem. The second example that I wanted to share is also something that I haven't specifically worked on, but a really exciting project that just recently happened within the past year at RGA. It's something that our team, primarily in Austin, but also in a few other offices, worked on with Sonic, the drive-in quick service brand. And so Sonic is obviously a heritage brand. It's been around for, I think, decades. And over the course of time, consumer expectations have evolved. They wanted to start seeing the potential for mobile ordering or something to make the ordering experience that much more seamless with Sonic. And so in partnership with them, we built out a strategy and corresponding app that essentially allowed ordering to be so much more quick and centered around this button for ordering that Sonic has had throughout the decades that it's been of existence. And so the app is still performing very well. It's one of the top ways that people order for food from Sonic in general. And we've seen that over the course of time, because people's habits are changing, the human experience is changing, where we're always on our phones, we're always looking at our phones. Something like this was the perfect strategy to help bring our clients where they needed to be and become that more relevant to their consumers. And then one final example, which I did work on right when I started RGA, and I still am working on it to date, is a partnership that we have with the craft retailer here in the US called Michaels. And last year around this time, Michaels came to us with a really interesting business problem, which was that for the longest course of time, people have really been leaning on Michaels for promotions and deals and discounts. But Michaels saw that there was an opportunity to connect with those people and consumers at a more human level. And so in partnership with them, we created a creative strategy and a campaign called Made by You, where we are essentially finding people who are extremely creative, who have made it into a business, who have made a side hustle for themselves, and we're giving them spotlights across digital, social, Michael's website, Michael's stores, Michael's ads, you name it. Everything has got these makers at the forefront. And this was a very unique approach for Michael's and has been extremely well received since our official launch in March. And the reason why is because we have been using, the stories of these makers and allowing them to essentially take up the spotlight in everything that we do, and really show that we are here for our consumers, and we're here to give this group of people everything that they want and need as their partner and as a brand. And so this one has been obviously very close to my heart. I've been working on it since day one that I started at RGA, and it's been a really exciting journey to be able to connect with so many of these amazing makers and people who are just so excited about being creative, being crafty, and, you know, telling their story as well. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely follow Michael's, check out their website and see some of the work that we've done there. And again, you know, there's just so much possibility with a campaign and strategy like this that as a strategist and as someone who's contributing to some really big picture creative thinking, it's been exciting for me at this point in my career. And outside of RGA, I've been able to use this kind of skill set or mindset of being a strategic thinker to a lot of my personal side hustles as well. Jaleisha mentioned before I kicked off on these slides that I also lead up marketing for two community-based organizations. One is called MWP, which stands for Muslim Women Professionals. And what we do is we provide spaces and a platform essentially for professional Muslim women to connect with one another. And because this is a nonprofit that basically started from the ground up, there needed to be a lot of marketing and a lot of strategy that went into building this nonprofit as a brand. And so to this date, I still work with the marketing team on the MWP side very closely to build, you know, a strong, highly visible brand for Muslim women who want to connect with one another. And at a little bit smaller of a scale, I also work on another side hustle called Brown Girls Food Club. And I started this around the time that I had moved to Austin and started working at RGA, but the same sort of skill set that I've built as a strategist of thinking through what women of color need and the spaces that women of color want to have to connect with one another was kind of the trigger for me and a couple of the other build something like this. But it's essentially an online virtual community gathering destination for women of color to chat with one another, share their lives, their backgrounds, and their stories and experiences with one another over a plate of food. And so we have, you know, monthly sessions where you can RSVP for free, join, you know, meet people across the US and connect with one another over food that you bought from a local minority-owned restaurant. And so, you know, like I said before, a lot of my kind of skill set as a strategist has been playing into things even outside of my day-to-day role at RGA, into things that I'm passionate about because of my background as a Muslim woman and a woman of color. So that's all the slides that I have. I know we wanted to get into a Q&A, and I hope I haven't spoken for too long, but Jaleisha, I'm going to pass it back to you to, you know, kick all of that off.
All right, man, that ain't no problem. No, you said a lot, and I feel like that's like so interesting. Like, you told me way more now than what I knew before too. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I was texting the chat, I was like, wow, this is like so dope. Like, this is crazy. But one of the things that I really wanted to ask, you know, right off the bat is, you know, what exactly is like strategic thinking? Like, how is that skill set sort of built? And how do you know if you have like a skill like that? And how do you even like present that? Be like, oh yeah, I know how to strategic think. You know, like that's not something you can like put on like a portfolio or like, you know, a resume, you know.
Oh
like,
yeah, for sure.
There has to be something to back it up.
I mean, there are so many different types of strategists. Like myself, I come from like a social media and digital background, but there are people who work more in brand strategy, media strategy, user experience strategy, which I've also started to delve into a little bit more just recently. And there's just so much to it. But I think one common thread between anybody who considers themselves a strategist is just this like natural inclination of curiosity, like constantly asking questions. I've had like previous employers tell me in the past that I always have a lot of questions, and I try to be very like intentional and mindful about the way I ask them, but being very curious about, you know, like I said before, the consumers, the world around you. I think that's a very important skill to like identify within yourself. But also, you know, being like forward thinking from like a creative perspective. You know, some of the times when I'm speaking with a client, they're just thinking about their day to day. How can they make a sale? How can they get more customers through the door? And for me as a strategist, I'm trying to think as far past that as possible to get them the objective that they're looking to hit. And so it's that combination of being really curious, learning about things constantly all the time, being a sponge, but also being very forward looking and thinking about the end goal or the objective at the end of the line. And I think, if you're just starting off in strategy, or if you're curious about learning in strategy, if you see those sort of characteristics in yourself already as someone who's just a creative person who could potentially work in strategy, I think those are some of the I guess baseline check marks to check off before exploring an actual full-blown career in strategy.
All right. Dang, that's awesome. I mean, can you sort of tell us, like, how did you get to this point? Like, how did you jump off into this career? Like, what were you in high school to where you're a strategist now? Like, I wouldn't have told my teacher when I grew up.
I mean, I've only learned how to define strategy within the past, I'd say 3 to 4 years of my career. So for a long time, I was like just figuring it out as I went along. I'd say even prior to getting into my undergrad, I knew that there were a few key things that I was good at. I've always been like a very creative person. I've always loved photography, art. I kind of entered college around the same time that social media became a little bit more of an established practice within businesses. So those were just things that were always very exciting to me. And I just wanted to find a way to bring all those things together in a productive way. There was a point in time where I kind of skewed away because I was like, I don't know if you could build a sustainable career out of like being excited about social media or being excited about apps. So I explored like a career in like IP and law for like 2 months, and I realized that wasn't for me. But for me, it started with my own personal passions and interests. I worked as a kind of like freelance fashion blogger for a point in time. I did styling in the fashion industry for a point in time, which then got me into social media. And then from there, I worked my way into becoming a marketing manager. And so when I was finally in a role as a marketing manager, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know enough about my consumer. And that's what really triggered me on, I wish I had a clearer strategy. And so at that point in time, I was like, oh, okay, that's what agencies are for. That's what consultants or strategists within an agency really do and really help for brands or marketers who are working in-house. So it definitely wasn't a linear path, but for me, it was all about just identifying those sort of strengths that I had earlier on, or the things that I was really excited about, and then just like really trying to find a way to, I guess, pursue those things productively over the course of time.
And can you tell us about any like mentors or any like, like key experiences that you had that sort of led you to this path?
It's funny. Like, I think I'm connected with a lot of people who are, several years ahead of me in this career path, but I've never actually formally asked someone to be my mentor. So I have a lot of like unspoken mentors. Usually they're people who, I guess, saw something in me and like hired me on, or just like championed me along the way. But I'm really lucky in that a lot of my key mentors or previous managers at my previous places of employment have been women or women of color who have just encouraged me to stay curious and find different ways to explore things that I'm really excited about. And same can be said for my experience right now at RGA. I have really great managers, really great mentors there. I guess you'd consider them unspoken mentors, but I think from like a key moments perspective, there were 2 moments for me that helped me realize that I wanted to work in strategy. The first was during my first full-time role when I was working at a marketing manager for a technology company. I was just wearing like so many different hats that I quickly realized that I was extremely curious about 2 elements of marketing. The first being the creative and like the human element of connecting with people. But on the flip side, which is very different, I was also very curious about like the technological element of marketing, which is like, how can you make cool filters and like technologies that connect with people, and lenses and virtual reality, augmented reality, like all these different new and up and coming things, and using data in very interesting ways. So I'm happy that happened early on in my career. It really was like within a couple of weeks, I had been able to make that realization because I was wearing so many different hats, working in-house. And then that helped me better identify that I wanted to work in the agency setting. And then the second moment that I think things became for me was when I was actually in grad school and I was not working full time, but I was rather freelancing. And so I was working as a marketing consultant, just trying to make a couple dollars so I could keep my, education afloat and sustain, spending habits or whatever you want to call them. But during that point in time, I also realized that I really enjoyed speaking with people who were building a business from the ground up. So, small businesses, entrepreneurs, particularly minority-owned businesses. Those are the types of people that I really like to work with outside of my 9-to-5 because they are so passionate about what they do and they just want to find a way to grow and connect with people in a more long-standing sort of way. So those two things I think were like key moments for me and have helped contribute to where I'm at right now, where in my 9-to-5, working with RGA, I'm able to work with these large scale corporations, doing a little bit of that creative and a little bit of that tech through strategy. But then on the side, some of my side hustles, so to speak, with helping with MWP or some of the other stuff that's coming up for me as well, or even Brown Girls Food Club, those sort of minority-owned businesses and being able to consult on those types of projects just feel very gratifying to me as well and have helped me kind of ground myself in something a little bit more substantial than just an ad on, TV or social media or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so dope that you do that. Like you work with small and big companies. Were there any obstacles along the way of sort of developing yourself as a person in this field, and how did you overcome those things?
Yeah, I think there have been obstacles. Obviously in this industry, things are constantly changing. Like one day I think I know what a certain technology is, and 2 days later, like that thing has completely evolved 500 light years. So keeping up with the times is definitely not easy, and it's definitely like a consistent challenge that I think anybody who is working in strategy or even in digital in general definitely faces. I think the easiest way to stay on pulse with these different things that help contribute to a more productive way to work in digital is by just having conversations with, people who want mentorship from you or your own personal mentors or your colleagues, and just like learning from them as much as you can, especially when you're outside of school. It's hard to just continue learning. But there are so many different workplaces who allow like stipends or different like means of educating their employees so that the employees themselves feel like they are staying up to date on the latest and greatest that's happening in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more like on a, I guess, skill set level, but I guess more on like a personal level, I would say over the course of time, it's been a little challenging for me. I'd say earlier on in my career to like really embrace my identity in my role. And so when I started off in my career, I would never talk about the fact that I'm a second generation Muslim woman or that my parents are US. They moved in their mid-20s. I never talked about, my different experience, my different upbringing, my background. And I think that definitely served a disadvantage for a long time because I didn't realize that as somebody who works in the creative space, it's almost incumbent upon you to like really bring in different perspectives so that content that goes out there or digital activations that go out there are representative of what's really out there in the world, which is, a whole melting pot of people. So I think over the course of time, it's been interesting for me to like expose more of that to my colleagues and the people I work with, or even of like bringing in my background, bringing in my experience, and like using that in a productive way too. So it's not something that can be solved in one go, but I think just being more vulnerable in that way has never been the easiest thing for me either.
Right. And I feel like that's really key that you said that. And I want to know, how do you think being a Muslim woman in the creative space sort of helps you bring out a more unique voice in the space? Like how does your identity affect the work that you do, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as a Muslim woman working in the creative space, it's highlighted to me the fact that I don't need to only be talking about Muslim women. I need to be talking about all underrepresented people. I guess for my background specifically, I represent a very specific type of Muslim woman. There's an entire spectrum of Muslim women, some who cover their hair, some who work in a different industry, a different field, who have a different background, who are raised differently. I'm just one of dozens of types of Muslim women. So applying that same principle to a lot of different underrepresented groups, whether it be people from the LGBTQIA plus community, people from other immigrant based backgrounds, the reality is that as someone with a diverse background, it's my responsibility as a strategist to say, hey, we need to think about everybody as individuals. And I think that's really been my sort of approach to having those sorts of conversations. So instead of talking about what Muslim women care about specifically and being only an advocate for the one type of Muslim woman that I represent, I'm able to instead come in and say, have we thought about the fact that there are dozens of types of people from all different categories, represented groups, and really just bringing in that perspective instead.
And how do you sort of educate yourself about like all of like these different cultures? I mean, there's so many different cultures out there. You know, a lot of these brands, you know, they offending people left and right.
Yeah.
And you know, they just have thing with Fenty. And you know, how do you sort of like, I don't know, how do you like gain like all of this knowledge, or how do you get all of these different perspectives to come into play whenever y'all are making decisions?
Yeah, it's not easy, like I said before. Like, I think that the main thing is, you have to know, like, you're never going to know everything, and just remaining like as free flowing as you possibly can to stay up to date with the times is, I think, the best mentality to take. But I think there are a few key tools when you do work within the discipline of strategy that help you plug in a little bit more and stay tapped into things. So like I mentioned before, like, I've got all sorts of Twitter feeds set up. I've got all sorts of Google alerts for things that I think are interesting or I think I need to learn about. RGA has provided all sorts of tools for me to continue to research and kind of execute that element of my skill set. So, just proactively finding those different tools and resources, I think, helps get you most of the way. But then also at a personal level, you just have to be curious about those sorts of things. Like, if there's a different type of person or a subset of people that I don't know about, I will Google to the ends of the earth to learn about them and like really get a sense of like what they care about. Because ultimately, if I'm not caring about what they care about, then there's no way that my client is going to be able to understand what they care about either. And so I've heard the term like people being a client whisperer, or sorry, a consumer whisperer when they work in strategy. And I think that's totally true. Like, you have to be so aware of the nuances of what people care about. And it honestly is it's not the most programmatic thing. It's a manual effort, and you just have to remain curious and find those opportunities for yourself.
Man, I think that's so dope that you get paid to sort of look through Twitter. Let me tell y'all what happened on Twitter today. This is what people are interested in. No, I'm just like, not like that. But I feel like that's like so cool that, like, you know, like, as a part of your job, you get to learn about like so many different cultures and like people, because not everybody like has that opportunity. You know, like other people, like, they just stick, you know, to one thing, you know. Yeah. And, you know, as you talked about before, you know, being in the space, you sort of like collaborate with like a lot of different people. And I want to know, like, you know, how do you like manage like doing that, you know, in your, you know, particular job field? I feel like it's, you know, especially now during COVID, you know, like, you're talking to so many different groups. How does that work?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it hasn't been easy. I feel like I'm on Zoom more than I would like to be. And, you know, it gives less time to do what I was previously doing when I was working in a physical office, which is go heads down and just research as much as I can and learn as much as I can. But I will say that, you know, depending on the team that you work with, you can find ways to collaborate with one another in you know, more micro, small ways. And so I found that in the beginning of COVID, when we were all working from home, we were all just like bombarding one another with conversations to make sure everybody knew what everybody else was doing and that the work was being done the right way, similar to how we kind of operated in the office. But now the collaborations are a little bit more bite-sized, and everybody is like very strategic about what the objective is, about having conversations and having ideation sessions can really get you towards. So it's definitely gotten better over the course of time. I think the key to collaboration with everyone is having a strong opinion and also being open to hearing other strong opinions. So as a strategist, you'll constantly be asked, like, what's your POV on this brand posting on this social network, or this brand doing something on their website in this way? And like, that is one of the main things your clients will ask you. What is your POV? So it's important that you come into conversations with the people that you're collaborating with on your team to also have an equally strong point of view. But also just recognize the fact that the people that you work with also probably have a point of view, and you need to be able to listen to their point of view to come to a consensus together. And I think in the virtual world, surprisingly, the way that we're all communicating with one another right now has actually built a little bit of a structure for that, where when I stop talking, you start talking, and when you stop talking, I start talking, and we're able to like a little bit more productively listen to each other. So I actually think that the time and space that we're in right now is making those conversations a little bit more structured. But what I will say is that I still miss the, in-person feeling of just getting together with my team and like sitting next to a whiteboard and brainstorming the hell out of an idea. And we haven't gotten, there quite yet. So, there still needs to be a lot of work to kind of fill those gaps. But I think as long as you've got a point of view and you're being open to listening to other people's point of view, that can take you very far.
All right. You're right. And there's like a lot of people, right now who are in, who work at E4 that like watch this. And a lot of us are like seniors or graduating or just recently graduating.
Yeah.
And I want to know, what advice did you have for students, coming into an industry like yours? Like, how do we get a job, in your field?
Great question. I think the first step that I've told anybody that I've like helped mentor, or even just people that I've met in passing through conferences or things like that, who are just early on in their career, is that before you do anything, you need to recognize and acknowledge what your strongest skills are. And once you're able to do that, you need to build a story out of it. So your resume, your portfolio, your website, your elevator pitch, everything needs to reflect those few strong key you feel about yourself as a future professional, as an individual. And then everything else will start to line up from there. I know I'm probably like oversimplifying things, but like at a very tactical level, if you sit down and just say, okay, I've gone through 4 years of school, what were my favorite things and what was I good at? Chances are you'll be able to come up with a list of things that got you really excited. And because you were so excited, you made some really cool work. So I feel like it's almost like a domino effect when you like look at the things that are interesting or exciting to you and things that you become really strong at, and like really build your personal or professional, I should say, story out of it. It's a really strong way to make everything consistent, so that when an employer is reviewing your stuff, or you have like an informational conversation with a prospective employer, they understand what you're all about, and you have also sold yourself on what you're all about. And I think when people are early in their career, they're like, oh, I want anyone to take me. I just want to get a job in this crazy market. There's a pandemic happening. And that's all true. Like, you do need to keep in mind the financial element of things, but the reality is you need to sell yourself on how skilled you are and what your strong points are, and then you're going to be able to sell it to anybody else too. So I would just recommend, taking that first exercise of what am I good at, and then using that as the first building block towards everything else.
But I also do just want to open it up to Q&A.
Sure.
Right now. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. And then while y'all put questions in the chat, I just want to ask one last question on what were like some of like the most creative ways that you've seen people, sell their story.
I've been seeing some really interesting stuff happening on TikTok right now. There's a lot of people who have either just graduated high school or college, and they're doing all these like career tips. And one that comes to mind for me is this girl who basically made a TikTok campaign, just posting on TikTok every day so that she could get a job at TikTok. And I thought that was the most clever thing ever. I mean, the app itself has grown exponentially in the past 9 months. And the fact that she was able to prove that perfect person to work at the company because I thought was like so smart. And then on her she shared her the layout of her resume, and she made her resume look like the TikTok app itself. And I just think like being so creative and intentional about the things that you do in that way could be so much of a differentiator, and could be, an interesting way to get your foot in the door. So I would just encourage anybody who is looking to do so to just think out of the box and think about what they really want, and let everything else kind of follow suit.
Wow, that's so dope. I have never heard something like that. And sis said, I want the job, I'm gonna get the job. Period. All right, but so I'll have our first question from Carl. He said, you mentioned being hired by people of color with the ad and media industry. How do you feel about the state of diversity and inclusion in your company and industry?
I'm not sure if it's you or me, but you're cutting off a little and I wasn't able to hear the question.
Oh, my bad. Carl asked about how do you feel about the state of diversity and inclusion in your company and industry? Oh, she left. That is totally okay. This is online, and things happen. And it be like that sometimes. But I think the stuff Amber was talking about was super dope, and super like creative. Like it's stuff that like I never like would have thought about thinking, and it really reminds me of the stuff that we talked about last week with our last speaker about design thinking and how like developing a creative mindset is essential to the work that you do as a creative. Really like thinking outside the box and trying to come up with solutions to issues that are happening, and I think that's like what she does as a strategist is she thinks of different ways to come up outside the box, but in not like in a design thinking way where she's like creating a product, but in a way where she's creating solutions to like brands or like building brands up. And I think that was like so dope, and I think this talk was like super amazing. And I'm not sure what connection issues she's having, but stuff happens and that's totally fine. But I personally think the conversation was really dope. I was taking notes during the conversation because I thought it was super great. And I think the tips she gave and the things that she talked about were super important. But yeah, I think that is it for the talk for right now. And so I'll just end it off here. But if you guys are interested in, hearing more talks just like this and learning about new jobs in the industry, make sure you come back and check out, the Facebook, YouTube. We have conversations like this every week on Wednesday at noon, where we talk about, different things in the industry. We really want to show, you guys what things are out there that you can be learning about. I know I'm learning a lot, even as a senior. I'm like, dang, I want to change my career path kind of. But also E4 Youth, as an organization, like really like their goal is to like, help Black and Brown students get into the creative industry and learn about all of these different jobs. So even like all the things that we do at E4 Youth sort of prepare us for industries like the one she's going to. And they connect us and help us get mentors with people in the industry and help us develop stuff. Not develop stuff, develop skills that go into that. Oh, I think Amber is popping back up. But yeah, but also you can apply, to be a part of like the E4 Youth Creative Leadership Academy, and be able to like, get to know like more dope people like Amber as well. If you check out our website at e4youth.org, the link will be in the comments. But hi, Amber, welcome back. You sort of cut out there. I don't know what happened. Oh, dang. Is she still not there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, and she's gone. All right. Okay, that's totally fine. Make sure y'all follow us on Twitter, Instagram, at e4u.org. Go to our website. You know, if you want to connect with stuff like this, you can check that out.